Hello, everyone, and thanks for watching this recorded PowerPoint presentation about Penticton's housing policy updates. My name is Stephen Collier. I'm the Housing and Policy Initiatives Manager at the City of Penticton, and I'm happy to walk you through what's being proposed with building our future in Penticton. So to start with some background, housing affordability has become a major issue in Penticton and across BC as housing prices have outpaced income and housing demand outpaces supply. Because of this, City Council, as well as the provincial and federal governments, have all identified housing as a major need to be addressed. We've seen a lot of population growth in Penticton recently, and we're growing a lot faster than we have in the past. This slide shows that Penticton grew by over 3,000 people from 2016 to 2021, according to the census data. In 2021, we had roughly 37,000 residents, and that represents a 9.3% population increase from 2016 to 2021. That's quite a bigger increase than from 2011 to 2016, the previous census period, where we had about 34,000 residents in 2016, representing a 2.6% population increase from 2011. Penticton's current official community plan was completed in 2019, and the official community plan projected population growth looking out to 2046. Uh, Based on the latest data at the time, it was projected that we would grow by about 250 new residents per year, with a total of 7,500 people and 4,500 dwellings, working out to about 150 new homes needing to be built every year. In reality, we've grown quite a bit faster than the official community plan had predicted. Since 2016, we've seen over 3,000 new homes get built, which works out to an average of about 385 per year. Based on the official community plan projections, close to 1,400 more homes are needed to meet our projected 30-year housing need, and we're on pace to hit that number by the end of 2026. That's 20 years ahead of schedule. This slide here breaks down the types of homes that have been built in Penticton since 2014. You can see that there's a range of different homes being built in the city, and a lot of those are multifamily types, everything from duplexes to townhouses to apartments. On the far right, you can see the annual total of new homes constructed, and since 2016, that number has rarely dipped below 400. Since 2014, single-family dwellings make up about 20% of new home approvals, and multifamily dwellings make up about 80%. And the total there is about 3,500 new housing units approved since 2014 over the last 10 years. According to our most recent housing needs assessment, the City of Penticton needs to build a minimum 240 to 380 new housing units annually simply to meet the basic housing demand or population growth now expected. And we're seeing development happen across the city. This map shows that there's developments proposed in the north end, south end, and central parts of the city, as well as on some of the hillside neighborhoods. These developments are mostly infill projects in the built-up core of the city. And there's a larger version of this available on shapercitypenticton.ca if you want to look in more detail and see these projects one by one. Breaking that down a little bit further, this map shows the approximate numbers of units in different development areas of the city, and it includes both approved and proposed developments at this time. These are only estimated housing unit counts, while the housing needs assessment identified up to 9,200 new units needed by 2046. If all of these development areas build out to the estimated number of units shown on the slide, the city would still be short around 2,500 needed units. City Council and their strategic priorities identified housing as a main focus for their term, as defined by the livable and accessible priority. This priority involves proactively planning for deliberate growth focused on an inclusive, safe, and desirable place to live. Working towards that goal, Council supported the completion of a housing needs assessment for the community, which outlined the enormous need for all types of housing over the next 20 years. Council also created a housing task force to complete a review of the housing sections of the city's official community plan to create a more fertile environment for residential development. The task force recommendations were presented in December 2023, and Council has given staff direction to incorporate those changes into the work outlined in this presentation. The Housing Task Force consisted of 13 community members, 2 council liaisons, and the group met 11 times between May and November 2023. The task force discussed and deliberated on 18 final recommendations to City Council to address residential growth trends and housing needs, assist the targeted consultation to gather input on housing needs and review and recommend new and innovative housing forms to benefit housing affordability. As mentioned, all levels of government have currently set housing as a priority. The province has outlined their housing plan in their Homes for People Action Plan, released in April of last year. In fall 2023, the province brought in legislation changes to implement the Homes for People Action Plan. The legislation includes 4 key bills. Bill 35, dealing with short-term rentals. Bill 44, creating amendments to the Local Government Act and Community Charter, prohibiting many public hearings and requiring local governments to amend their bylaws to allow for up to 4 units on previously single detached and 2 family zone properties. Bill 46 deals with development financing, and Bill 47, the creation of transit-oriented areas. I'll get into a bit more detail of each of these changes later in the slides. The federal government has also taken a major step in the housing file with the creation of the $4 billion Housing Accelerator Fund and other programs, including the elimination of GST on purpose-built rental buildings. On the Housing Accelerator Fund, the city applied for this grant application last year based on our housing need and expected growth. To qualify for the application, we proposed 7 initiatives to help boost the number of homes built locally. Those initiatives include creating a housing approval staff team, utilizing our lands for housing opportunities, accelerating new housing growth in key areas of the city, reducing parking requirements, looking into pre-approved missing middle home plans, removing or revising density and height restrictions in the city, and pre-zoning strategic areas to allow for home development. All this background information is to say that we're working hard on a number of proposed housing policy updates to implement the local housing task force recommendations, provincial legislation requirements, and prepare for announcements on the Housing Accelerator Fund initiatives. All of that leading into the official community plan and zoning bylaw housing updates being proposed. So I want to take a closer look at the provincial housing changes. The BC government is concerned that the negative impact that short-term rentals have on housing and has passed an act to create a principal resident host requirement as of May 1st, 2024. This applies to all cities across the province with a population over 10,000 and select other communities. A provincial host registry is being established and provincial enforcement of this new rule is going to be created. Business license information must be displayed for any short-term rental, and the local government affected may request exemption from the principal resident host requirement only if the local rental vacancy rate is greater than 3% for at least 2 consecutive years. On that rental vacancy rate, you can see on this slide that Penticton's rental vacancy rate history shows that it's rarely been over 2%. So we do have quite a bit of room to go before we hit that 3% threshold to be able to have short-term rentals in the community under the new provincial rules. This slide shows when public hearings are prohibited and when public hearings are still going to be held under the provincial changes. Public hearings are prohibited by legislation if the rezoning is for a proposal that is at least 50% residential, is aligned with the OCP, and for bylaws that are only for the purpose of implementing provincial mandates. Public hearings will still be held for any proposal where an OCP amendment is proposed, when the proposal is not considered aligned with the OCP, and if the proposal is for less than 50% residential use. For example, if a development is entirely commercial, industrial, or another non-residential use. Bill 46 provides new development financing tools to cities. The changes expand what cities could charge development cost charges for to include police and fire stations, as well as waste and recycling facilities. The legislation also establishes a framework for cities to adopt amenity cost charge bylaws, establishing a development financing tool similar to development cost charges, but funding specific amenities, which many cities in BC were funding through one-off negotiations with developers. The amenity cost charge framework would outline a standardized cost onto developers and move away from project-by-project negotiations. These funds can help support a vibrant community and provide more amenities as the community grows to support livability. It could be used for projects such as community centers, recreation centers, libraries, daycares, and public squares. Bill 44 also introduced small-scale multi-unit housing. This legislation requires local governments to allow, through zoning, between 3 to 6 units per lot in urban areas. The number of units depends on different criteria, including lot size, servicing, and how close the lot is to frequent transit. Looking through the criteria, Penticton must allow 4 units on single detached and duplex zone lots with full municipal services. The new density requirement does not apply to rural areas or to lots which aren't connected to municipal water and sanitary systems. There's a deadline attached to this legislation change from the province. The city has to update its zoning bylaw to allow for this new base minimum density by June 30th, 2024. In Penticton, that works out to allowing a minimum 4 units per lot on all previously single detached and duplex zoned properties. Bill 47, the last bill of the provincial changes being discussed today, sets out transit-oriented areas in cities across the province. The idea is that additional density and less parking should be allowed around bus exchanges to support transit use. In Penticton, the province has mandated the areas around Penticton Plaza and Peachtree Square bus exchanges as transit-oriented areas. This means the city must adopt a bylaw that allows no residential parking requirement, except for accessible spaces, within 400 meters of these bus exchanges. For properties within 200 meters, at least 6 stories must be permitted. And for properties within 200 meters, between 200 meters and 400 meters, must allow 4-story development. These areas don't have to be rezoned, but the bylaw must allow for the provincially prescribed minimum allowable densities and exempt city parking requirements in those areas. That means that the city can't require a certain amount of parking to be provided in developments within these transit-oriented areas, but developers may and likely will still choose to provide parking on site, just not needing to meet the typical requirements. This slide shows the provincially designated transit-oriented area around Penticton Plaza, the Safeway Plaza, near Main Street and Duncan. The properties in orange are between 0 to 200 meters from the bus exchange and qualify for a 6-story residential development, while the properties in blue are between 200 and 400 meters away and qualify for a 4-story residential development. All of the highlighted properties will not have parking requirements, just requirements for accessible parking stalls on site. This area extends to Fairview Road, the RCMP station, Carmel Elementary, and Industrial Ave. This map shows the other provincially designated transit-oriented area around Peachtree Square Plaza near Skaha Lake Road and Green Avenue. The 400-meter radius here extends to the Channel Parkway, Skaha Lake Middle School, up to Mark's Work Warehouse, and down to the Best Western Hotel. These changes also have a deadline set by the province, where the city of Penticton has to apply these transit-oriented areas through the zoning bylaw by June 30th, allowing for these minimum required densities, heights, and parking regulations as specified by the province. So moving on from the provincial legislation review, I want to go over the official community plan housing task force recommendations in this next section. At a high level, the official community plan task force recommendations focused on consolidating several land use designations to provide more housing flexibility, redesignating certain areas for more growth, updating housing policies to support more homes, and for the city to update or create new bylaws, plans, and policies, all to support housing development. Looking at the land use designation updates, these changes would be to create new OCP designations for low density residential, high density residential, and mixed use. This consolidates 6 land use designations into 3, allowing more flexibility in housing types in different areas. The designation changes include removing area-specific height limits on a section of Main Street in the downtown from 3 to 10 stories, and along a section of Lakeshore Drive from 4 to 6 stories. The changes include other minor updates to different designations. The OCP mapping changes include changing the single detached and duplex areas to the new low-density residential designation, supporting 4 to 6 units per lot in line with the provincial requirements. The Main Street Skaha Lake Road corridor and other major nodes are designated mixed use to support housing developments on existing commercial sites. The OCP Task Force recommended that the Spiller Road area be removed as a growth area, so the mapping change is to redesignate that area of the city from an urban residential development to rural residential in line with the existing zoning in that area. A number of housing policy changes are proposed. These include new language around where growth will occur in the city, reviewing parking requirements, supporting streamlined development approvals, and looking for ways to continuously improve. The task force wanted to see new development continue meeting or exceeding energy efficiency requirements. The city will support new and existing nonprofit housing and develop a social housing plan to better understand the needs and how to leverage provincial and federal funds for housing projects. The OCP update will include support for a wider range of unit types, including studio suites, and include policy directing staff to investigate incentive policies for certain types of housing and tools to fund more amenities as Penticton continues to grow. To help implement the OCP changes, the zoning bylaw will be updated at the same time. Several zoning changes are proposed to support the new provincial density requirements, rezoning all single detached and duplex zone lots to the new zoning, which allows up to 4 units per lot. The updates include designating the transit-oriented areas specified by the province and allowing for the mandated density, height, and no parking requirements in those areas. To support more homes downtown, on-site parking requirements will be removed and also removed for secondary suites and carriage houses to support them as rental units. Parallel to the OCP change, building heights in the 400 to 600 blocks of Main Street will be increased, and the front yard setbacks along a section of Lakeshore Drive West will be increased to maintain the character of that unique street. In addition to these changes, many more minor technical updates are proposed to help with interpretation and clarity of the zoning bylaw regulations. So for next steps, this slide shows an overview of our entire work plan. We're currently in the public engagement phase, which will lead over March and April prior to council consideration and adoption of these changes over May and June. Public engagement on all the upcoming housing initiatives is extremely important to inform the community and gather feedback on the proposed changes. The engagement period is running over March and April, and the dates have now been released and will be shared later in this presentation. Multiple in-person sessions are planned across the city. Shape Your City Penticton is going to be the main hub for information, and staff will be connecting with various interest groups and the Penticton Indian Band to collect feedback and discuss these changes with those various groups. So in summary, this presentation has covered staff's work plan for implementing the OCP Housing Task Force recommendations and provincial housing initiatives. These elements will feed into the work plan with some overlaps and interrelations between all these different initiatives. The consolidated plan focuses on implementing local, provincial, and federal housing directions, and the result will be a significantly refreshed development framework in Penticton. So what's next? Well, we have a number of in-person information sessions planned throughout March and April. You can see all the dates on this slide, and they're also posted elsewhere on Shape Your City Penticton. But we want to provide various opportunities and open house locations across the city to really reach out to the community, share these changes, and gather feedback. After engagement ends, we'll compile all the feedback, make any adjustments to the policy updates, and present the complete package to Council in May. A public hearing will be held with final adoption of the changes scheduled for June. So in conclusion, we invite you to please review all the materials on the Shape Your City Penticton website. And we will also welcome you to attend an upcoming information session or reach out to city staff if you have any questions on the housing initiatives and changes being proposed. And I really appreciate your attention during this presentation and look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.